This is APA Sticks and Stones by Rhonda Kitchens, librarian at Argosy University, Tampa. This is kind of, for me, kind of a plain little show or webinar for you, but I think it requires it. I'll start out first by making sure that when you're working with APA, you have the correct tools at hand. You actually do need to get the manual. It's 6th edition. Sometimes you can get a used version, but you really actually do need to get it. APA is more than what I'm going to be talking about today. It also has to do with a writing style. It has to do this. The APA manual has samples of your paper and how you set up the pages. It has sections on in-text citation and the references, which we'll talk about today. But it is a complete package. But it was printed in 2010. You also need to have this. Some of the things in APA have changed. I don't believe any of your professors are going to mark you down for it, but some of the things that changed will be something like Snapchat and Twitter did not exist when the publication manual was created, and other types of media. So the intermediate place where these rules are collected will be the APA style block. It's searchable. I'm going to show you how to use it. The next thing is, when you're using APA, and today we're just talking about journals with or without a digital object identifier called a DOI, that's how we find and connect information in the academic and scholarly world. And an APA reference for a journal prefers it over URLs and other things. When you need to find those, you can go to this site, select the Meta tab search tab, and find it. Other things you might find you need are from AL. That's the Online Writing Lab for Purdue. I have here 2 sections that are probably very useful for you. One has to do with the levels, 5 levels, headings, and seriation, like how you run things in a, like that kind of go with each other in a serial type of fashion, and how to use bullet points. Also, I put here AL APA sample paper with notes. I'm not actually going to cover that today, but you should know the basics. You're always going to be using Times New Roman 12-point font. Your margin will always be 1 by 1 by 1. And you can always look at these sample papers to kind of get a feel for it. I've put you 2 very important links here. Make sure you put this on your computer, and when you need APA help, you'll probably find a lot of what you need in this first part. Let me talk a little bit and show you about the APA style block. I am over here opening up another page. I'm going to bring you over. This is the APA style block, and it continues and explains where that the manual does not. It will not cover everything you need, so I still advise you get the book. However, suppose you have something like dissertation. How are you going to cite a dissertation? This will talk about all sorts of things, including the generic reference. Talks about style headings, but it may not be the best thing for a dissertation. I actually believe the book is, and that's not unusual. Now it looks for something like social media. Say you're using something on Twitter. You could also put in the word Twitter. You'll come here, and you'll find guidance about where to go for the different pieces you're using and how to format them. Also talks about a YouTube channel. Do you know how you cite a YouTube channel is different than a streaming video? Use this to look for them all. And you think, what is a streaming video? Suppose you use Alexander Street or something on your inside of your course, citing a streaming video database. And it just kind of popped away. But I hope you see how you can use this to get the examples you need to finish your references. You can also always ask your librarian, and AL as well has some helpful things. When you're looking for digital object identifiers, use crossref.org if it's not visible. Make sure you use the metadata search tab and put in a title. You can check it when it comes up to make sure that it has the last name of your author. In this case, it was Miller. And this is the entire piece that you will copy in to the end of your reference. I just wanted to get these 2 particular things out of the way up front before I go into the basic part of what I'm really going to talk about today. This particular presentation is specifically about one reference, but it's the one that you'll use most of the time. And once you get strong with this particular one, the rest of the rules will make a great deal of sense to you, and you may know what to look for where previously you did not. So, what we're looking at is a journal, a scholarly journal article reference. The essential elements are an author or authors and the decisions related to that, the date. At this point, when you finish these two pieces, you already have the pieces for your in-text citation. So these two pieces are very critical because a reference at the end of your article needs to match the in-text citation within your article. The next thing you have is the title, and it has specific capitalization rules. The journal name is italicized, and it also has a different set of capitalization rules. Then we have volume number, and I see here that I made a little bit of an error. A volume number in an issue. The volume is italicized, the issue number is not. The beginning to ending page numbers, it does need to have a beginning and an end if there are page numbers. And it ends with a digital object identifier that will be present within the text or in the reference that you find, or you will need to use a URL of the journal. That means you actually have to go to Google and find the URL. And this is on page 197 of your blue handbook if you have it. So generally, we like to really make sure we have the DOI numbers because APA prefers it. Now let's go see a real article. I'm going to talk to you about how these things match and what they should look like and some of the danger zones. Oftentimes, students believe that the articles themselves have correct APA. They don't. Oftentimes, journals will have an augmented form of APA specific to them. It may be APA based, but it may not be APA specific. Sometimes when you're working on dissertations or CRPs, you'll see that you have a style guide, and it does vary from the actual blue manual, 6th edition. Journals are the same way. Sometimes they have their own rules. So what you see here often is somewhat appropriate, but it also could be Chicago manual style, MLA, or other things. So when we're looking at a scholarly article, we'll see that it has a certain format. We know it has an abstract. We see who these people are, their ethics statements, so we understand those types of things. We have some keywords which are useful. But this is a place where sometimes students get in trouble. The front part, the introduction, the literature review, is very easy to read. And a lot of times you're going to want to use these sections. However, if it is followed by something like this, guess what? It's actually a secondary resource. If you want to cite this as Davis Bird, etc., you'll need to go to this article and read it in full. The only thing that should be in your references are the things that you have read in full text. And a secondary reference would refer to, in parentheses, as cited in Miller, etc., because this is the only thing you read, as cited in Miller, comma, Davis, comma, Ampersand, Rudy, and the dates. And I'll show you that more clearly. But just know this is a danger zone. If you're taking things that are already cited, that's a secondary citation. If you're taking things from the body of the work where the authors are beginning to create their own work, they're talking about the methods, they're talking about what they did. You'll see sections that do not have these. You'll see their conclusions, their measures, or other things that may be specific to them, say where they're talking about their therapist, methodology, the results. These belong to the author and should be cited to that author. Now, when we're up here, we'll see things that we might want to look into. And we'll see Muser. So this, if it's here, has to be down in the references. The references and the in-text citations are matchy-matchy, and they are a format, a signal phrase that is composed of the last name of the author and, to some extent, just the year. Now, we're going to have some variations. This is a very interesting piece. Now, I'm glad it's here, and I'd like you to look at it closely. Let me bring it up a little. And I'm going to talk about this. You see how this has the ... right here. Well, what this means is this had over 7 authors. I'm going to show you an example that has like 90. And what you do is you don't use all of the authors. You go to here, you use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Then you'll go comma, ellipsis, dot, 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 and then you'll use the last author. It's almost the only case where the last author, who could be a wonderful student assistant helping out, is actually included in the reference. And then it follows with a year. So you'll see this has 2 authors. It's connected with an ampersand and a comma. We're going to talk about that. Some of these are actually closed. This looks like this particular journal does rely on it. But you see how this ends with a digital object identifier? This ends with a digital object identifier, and you see how it looks? That's how your paper should appear as well. But your paper will be double spaced, and second and subsequent lines indented in most cases. Sometimes when you're working on discussion posts or with annotated bibliographies, your direction may be different, and it's always appropriate to ask the person who's grading your paper. Okay, so when we're looking at a reference, and this is the only thing we're going to learn today, is a reference for a journal, article with or without a DOI, and an in-text citation that serves as a signal phrase for it. So let's go over the rules. The first thing, let's talk about, sorry about that. Sorry guys, jumped around. First thing we're going to do is talk about authors. Now, if we just have one, it's last name, comma, first initial, period. If there's a middle name, please put that initial in as well. If you have 2 authors, you're going to connect them with an ampersand, not an A and D. So it's Smith, comma, G, period, ampersand, Smith, comma, H, period. Now, if it's more than 2, you're going to make sure you're going to include this thing as the Oxford comma, and it comes before the ampersand. And it's very important in APA. So it's Smith, comma, G, period, comma, last name, comma, first initial, period, comma, in front of the ampersand, last name, period, P, period. So those will cover most of the things you say. You see, now if it has more than 7 authors, that's where you're going to do this strange thing that I showed you. I was glad to show you how it looked in an actual article. You're going to use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of the authors, and with a period, an ellipsis, which is 3 little dots, and use the last name. In this case, I believe it is stated there were 92 authors, and you are not going to use those. This is how you treat them in the references section. How you treat them within the text is a little bit different, but still an odd number if it helps you remember it. So, the next thing we care about is publication dates, because pretty rapidly, I think in about a minute and a half there, I taught you everything you need to know about authors and their variations in terms of the references at the end. Now, the next thing you will deal with is the publication date. It's going to be very simple. Whatever it says, what it says there is what you'll use. If it only has spring, you will put that within your parentheses and in with a period. If it's 2018, you will put that in your parentheses and in with a period. If it has a date, February 14th, 2018, you're going to reorder it so that it says 2018, comma, February, absolutely never abbreviate, and the day in parentheses, period. If it has no date, which is somewhat unusual for a scholarly article, but possible, you will put N period, D period for no date, inside the parentheses, and it ends with a period. Now, I'm going to stop a little bit here, and I want to let you know that at this point you have composed the master part of the pieces that you'll be using in your in-text citations. Again, when I say that, I'm talking about these pieces here. Let me pull those up again. I'm talking about these pieces. As you can see, it says last name. We have et al., and I'll discuss where you use that. We have Harvey, comma, 2008. We have a lot of different people, last names, and there was 3 of them with 2015. So you'll see you just need that last name. You don't need the initials or anything like that. You're going to be using an ampersand inside of here and the date. So once you figure out how to deal with the names and you understand how to use the date, you already have all the meat that you need for your signal phrase. So I'm going to go a little bit down here. I have right here some in-text citations and how to use et al. And things like that, just for your own personal use if you come here asking questions. Here, it would be comma, Smith, parentheses, Smith, comma, 2018, and parentheses, period, is one of the most common ones. Now, when you have quotations, there is an expectation you will also have a page number or a paragraph number. If it's not expensive, para would be P-A-R-A period. A page would be P period. And for some reason your quote goes over 2 pages, it would be like P period 34-35. And it would be only specifically where the item in quotes is at. If you do something like a paraphrase inside, anytime you have these, make sure that you have a page number. You can also order it in this fashion. Smith, 2018, inside the parentheses, found that apples are poison. If there's multiples, while you use the ampersand in your references at the end, like here, you do not use them inside of your text. So it would be Smith, Smith, and Smith. If we had no date, we would put that in period, D period, in parentheses, found that apples are poison. Now, again, I want to make sure you see that comma in front of the and is there for the authors. The Oxford comma is definitely used. Now, suppose you have 6 or more authors, or you're quoting this for the second time. What do? Simple. You will go Smith et al., and it's A-L period, comma, in parentheses, 2010, and continue with your statement. As you'll see, I'm trying to find one demonstrated here. I'm going to bring this over. This one looks like this inside the parentheses. If you want to ask me, and you should, like, why are there 5 different authors for this one statement? Sometimes when you do a lot of research, a lot of authors come up with the same idea, and when you paraphrase it, you put down all the authors separated by a semicolon that came up with that idea. This is probably going to be dissertation level, but I also want you to see it so when you're reading a paper that you'll know all those authors contributed to that thought or came to the same thought. So let's look at this. I'm hoping this makes sense, bouncing back and forth. So this is our complete reference, and this is how our citations would read for this reference. Okay, the sky is blue. We'd have just the last names, not the initials, and we'd have the and, comma, 2016. Suppose that this is a quote. The sky is blue in quotation marks. Then parenthesis, Wren and Cottle, comma, 2016. Then the page, period, 203, in parenthesis, period, where the quote was found. Then, if you're using it, kind of break it up, Wren and Cottle, 2016, found that the sky was blue. It would look simply like this. We pulled this here, and that there. Now, if you used sort of a paraphrase in there, let me fix that here. That should be a little T. You would still need to, since it's a quote, put a page number. So when you have these with a quotation mark, the quotation mark goes with the sentence. The period is going to be outside. See how the period is outside of all of these here? The period ends it, and the parenthetical phrase is inside. So even when you do your paraphrase, the quote stays with a quote, and the end part in the parentheses ends with a period. And it has that very definite look. This particular section pretty much handles almost everything you'll do with a journal article. So it's a fairly good example for you to keep. Now, the next section we have for reference is going to be, for the journal, is going to be titles. They have a specific capitalization thing that you need to do. Only 3 things are capitalized. The first word is capitalized, a word following a colon, and a proper noun or noun phrase, like the name of a person. If it was, say, the name of a disease, Alzheimer's disease, Alzheimer's would be capitalized, disease would not. There's a couple other things like that. But if it's a disease that is not the name of a person, it's not capitalized. So sometimes it's good to ask or try to find out if it is a proper noun. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in terms of chemicals. So we have the front part of a reference: last name, first initial, period, the date is inside the parentheses, period. Apples are poison, only the A is capitalized. Here, apples are poison, the real story. This follows a colon, so the is capitalized. Apples are poison, the Granny Smith story. After colon, the is capitalized. Granny Smith is also capitalized. This covers almost every way. When you see a citation presented to you, this is most of the time the way that you'll need to fix it. It's essentially called sentence case. The only thing that's capitalized, and here's your rules right there. Now, if we look up here, because this is what we're headed to, we have our authors. We know all the things we do with the dates. We now know how to capitalize our titles no matter what they look like, where you got it from. Your paper reflects APA 6th edition. We'll see this one is correct. It does have a colon, and strategies is capitalized. The next section we're going to look at is the journal name itself. The journal name has a different capitalization procedure. It's in title case. So almost everything in the name of the journal is capitalized except for articles, conjunctions, and prepositions. So in this case, the Apple Journal of Poison, of is not capitalized. And this would be the capitalization piece that you're probably most familiar with in your work. The title of the article may be the one you have to keep checking. The next thing, and it's very important, the journal name is italicized. Now, volume is also going to be italicized, and it's just a number. There is nothing else going on with this. It is a number. No VOL, no hashtag, no anything. It follows a comma of the italicized journal name. It is also italicized as a volume number, and that's all it looks like. That's it. Let's go up there and look at our correct one. We see it here. Studies in higher education. The N is not capitalized, comma, and the 41 is there and italicized. We see it follows here. That's the issue number. The issue number, when it's there, is in parentheses. When it's not there, you go straight to the comma. And the page numbers are beginning and end, period, and it ends with a digital object identifier. So, we've got the journal names. We have the volume number. It has nothing around it. The issue number does not have a hashtag. It doesn't have NO period. It has nothing around it. It is simply inside parentheses. That's all it does. Now, the page numbers in APA should be beginning and end. If there's not a ending page number and there's a PDF, go look for that end page number. And you're going to end that section with a period. There you're going to need to make your next decision, which is, does it have a digital object identifier or not? Well, let's look over here at our piece that we're looking at. Most of the time in ProQuest, EBSCO, and our other databases, we will have a citation. The rule here is to copy and correct it. Do not copy and use it. Let's give this a look. This has last name, first initials, it has period and comma. Last name, comma, first initials with periods, has a comma from the ampersand. Last name, comma, initials, both with the periods. It has a publication date inside the parentheses, ends with a period. We have a title, and look at that. Nothing is capitalized except for the P and the B following the colon. That is absolutely correct. Dreaming is the journal name. It's italicized. That is correct. 28 is the volume number. It follows the comma after the italicized journal name. That is correct. We have here the issue number. It's inside the parentheses. It ends with a comma. That is correct. We have a beginning and ending page number. It has a period. That is correct. We have a DOI. That is not correct. They came close, but it's not correct. So I want you to see here, This is the piece that you just snip out of these. What your blue book will say is correct for the DOI, and what the AP blog will say is correct for the DOI is going to be different, but currently they are both correct. This is where we're going, but this is how some of them still appear. If you put this at the end of your reference, you would be right. If you put this at the end of your reference, you would be right. If you put this at the end of your reference, you would be wrong. You would need to take out this section, and you'll see that it models on what looks correct. It's there because this database, like many of them, cannot crunch down how all these different journals do their different types of elements when it brings them together. So there almost always is going to be some form of imperfection. Now, the explanation of all this, if you want to see it in person, read over it, discuss it with your professor, here's your URL for that. Remember when I said if you can't find a DOI, as you can see, it's so much an easier way to go. Go to the meta tab and search for that digital object identifier, which at this point is going to look just like this because it's up to date. And it's very easy. You'll put it at the end of your reference. Do not end it with a period. Now, if there is no DOI, what you're going to have to do is go to Google and look up the name of the journal. In this case, let's go up here to this. We would look up studies in higher education in Google. We put it in parentheses, and then we put retrieve from http://www.studiesinhighereducation.edu or whatever it might be. That's your alternative. So your DOI will look like this, it will look like this, or it will be the URL of the journal name that you look up. An explanation of all this is all here. This may not be something you remember immediately. So yes, I remember now it's on page 192. So I just want to make sure that you see it. Websites without authors that actually belong to organizations may be another thing that is kind of a curveball for you. Sometimes an organization will definitely write different things, but sometimes they also do scholarly articles. That organization is the author. The Centers for Disease Control, Children's Bureau, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, these are all author names. And when you put them in the in-text citations, it will reflect that. Children's Bureau, comma, 2012, just like it would in the reference. Now, you remember how I was talking about those secondary citations. First of all, if you're dissertation level, you need to find the full text of those. And you could take my Google Scholar class or ask me about Google Scholar to understand how to do that. But in most papers, you can only use 1 to 2 of the secondary sources, and usually like on the extreme thing that's out of print and you can't find it. But suppose ZB found trees were rivers, and you had read it at the top part of this article right here, and you see this, right? And this is a part you want to use, but it was done by these people. This is how you would do it. As cited in the case of that article, it would be Miller. Whoever is the full text article you're reading is what it will be, and your reference will go to Smith 2018, the actual thing you're reading. If you did not read it, you do not put it in your references. If you read it inside of someone else's, you will put as cited in, last names of the authors, and the publication date in parentheses period. And as a warning, much like a block quotation, professors do not want to see a lot of these. They want to see you find the original pieces. And the library is really a great place to do that. So I'm hoping that was helpful. So let's look at these. These are not correct. So let's go look at them piece by piece. We need to have last name, first initial. We have a full name. Let's get that down. Ends with a period. We have a publication date in parentheses, ends with a period. Now we need to see if this is capitalized correctly. This actually is not. With chemical names, the chemicals that are scientific names are not capitalized. But suppose it was like Raid. That's a brand. Now that is a proper noun, and that will be capitalized. That ends with a period. The next thing will be the journal name. It's going to be in italics. It's going to be followed by a period. This 22 is also going to be italicized. We have here 1 through 4. That's kind of quirky. Sometimes you'll see some quirky issues. It's not inherently wrong if that's what the article says. Ends with a comma, beginning and ending page numbers. And we have our DOI, which is correct. We will look at this. We have last name, first initials, last name, first initial period. We do not have a comma here in front of the ampersand and a space. Very important. All ends with a period. We have the publication date in parentheses, ends with a period. We have this, and oh yeah, these are wrong. You would need to go through here and make these small. And sometimes it is kind of picky in regard to that, so, but let me... Now, the journal title, everything is capitalized except for prepositions, articles, conjunctions, and that is correct. We have a volume number is italicized, yes. Our issue number is in parentheses, comma, yes. And in beginning page numbers, yes. We have our DOI, no. It's got this piece in it. Let's take that out. This is just something that was pulled into the database, but it's not there. Now that looks right. Next thing, Hill, AR, comma, and %, Reynolds, comma, S period, L period, 2002, inside parentheses, period, unit to unit availability, pesticides, that is correctly capitalized. Food additives and contaminants, yes, and we have a no. And actually, this is one of the most frequent mistakes I see. This is a pure numerical statement. So I'm going to take this back. The 19 is italicized. There is no number. The issue number is inside parentheses. There is no PP. The PP and page numbers are only used in in-text citations, but never in the reference. This is a comma. Then we have beginning and ending page numbers. Hey, and the DOI is correct. And it will vary with your professor. I just went in and took the underline out because that would be the most correct. Now we have this Holby with an I, J, period, Jean, initials. Yes, we have that comma. We have and. That's no space. We have this, and this is not correct. It's really close, but you never abbreviate the month in APA in the references. Ends period. Efficacy and phytotoxicity of lime sulfur in organic apple production. The only thing capitalized is the first letter. That is correct. Now look at this journal name. This is not correct. Let's get rid of that. A prepositional phrase should be not capitalized. Remember, these are exactly opposite. Almost nothing is capitalized in the title name. Almost everything is capitalized in the journal name. We have the comma, the volume number is italicized. We have the 2 inside the parentheses because it's an issue number. Comma, beginning and ending page numbers have the DOI. That is correct. All right, let's look at these in-text citations. They're supposed to go to the ones up above. We have a last name, a comma, 2004. We're assuming this is the end of the sentence. Has a period. That is right. We have initials in this. Absolutely not correct. This is frequently an error I see. You just use the last name. I'm going to go through, and you also forgot the comma, and that is correct. In parenthesis, period. We have this with this, and it has a comma. And this is hard, but these are the last names of the person. We have the ampersand, and we have the Oxford comma in front of it. That is correct. The publication date, period. And if you go up here, you'll see they match with those guys. Apples are poison. Holb, Dijon, Hein, blah. Oh, that's not right. See over here? That colon, that thing needs to come at the end. That period needs to go over here. This is often a place that students have a little bit of trouble of getting that in order. Then we have Holb, Dijon, and Hein, 2003. Filnet apples are poison. We got our ampersand. But you know what? This is the inside the text. We don't use an ampersand. This actually has to be the whole word. Okay? So, these are all the sources I used. I also want to refer you to a human source, Stephen Canavel. And he does APA checks and writing help. Sometimes you'll find that you have a citation at the end of everything. He can help you understand scholarly articles. He can also help you with all number of different things that could be helpful with your writing, transitions, making sense, outlining things. If you're having a struggle when your professor says write, use all 5 levels of APA, and you're like, what does that mean? Stephen is an awesome person who can go through that with you. He's also very helpful with annotated bibliographies as well. So you have a very strong person to help you. I hope this was helpful. I know it was kind of plain and not extremely beautiful, but I wanted to, helping the repetition and the lack of spinny body things was useful to you. And the order, if you have any questions, please, please feel free to ask. I can talk about this stuff all day long, and I really don't mind, because every time I repeat it to you and I say something, only 3 things in the title that are capitalized are a first word, the word after the colon, and a proper noun and noun phrase, you will start remembering it and it'll start going through your head. I am sending with this video also a checklist. The checklist on one side goes through what I just said piece by piece, so you could sit there with your paper, with your references, and go through them. One of the things you also need to make sure is that your references actually match in-text citations. You don't want to have an in-text citation that goes nowhere, or a reference that doesn't match something, because that makes it look like you didn't cite something, which puts you in peril for plagiarism. So that's another thing, to make sure your in-text citations match your references. It's matchy-matchy. You can't have one without the other. They go together. They are a pair. And I hope this presentation helped you understand that clearly. And again, I would be glad to go over your paper before you turn it in, talk to you about it, or anything that you may need, because I would love for you to be absolutely successful and for APA to be the last thing you think of when you're working on your great works. Have a great day.